The courtroom fell into an eerie silence. The judge, a tall, stern-faced man with a silver mane of hair, glared down at the man in the wheelchair before him. His lips curled in disdain as he leaned forward, tapping his gavel against the bench. "This is a court of law, not a charity house," Judge Malcolm snorted, his voice dripping with mockery. "I don't know who let you roll in here thinking you could play lawyer, but this isn't a joke." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. The man sitting in the wheelchair, his back straight and his expression calm, didn't flinch. He had heard it all before: pity, mockery, disbelief. But never had he been dismissed so outright in a place where justice was supposed to be served. The judge scoffed again, shaking his head. What could a crippled ex-soldier possibly know about the law? "I suggest you find yourself a real attorney before I toss this case out of my courtroom." Gasps filled the air. Even the opposing attorney, a smug corporate lawyer in an expensive suit, arched an eyebrow at the judge's words. The man in the wheelchair slowly laced his fingers together, a small smirk forming at the corner of his lips. He lifted his chin, his sharp, knowing eyes locking onto the judge's. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that sent a shiver down the spines of those present. "I believe you should check your records before you continue embarrassing yourself." Judge Malcolm frowned. "Excuse me?" The man leaned forward. "You may not recognize me, but 10 years ago, I won a case so legendary that it's still taught in law schools today. The case of U.S. v. Greystone Corporation. I am Jonathan Grayson." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. A few attorneys in the back whispered hurriedly among themselves. Judge Malcolm's face turned ghostly white. His hands trembled as he reached for the case files before him. His eyes scanned the documents, widening with every line. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. No, that's impossible," the judge stammered. You're him?" Jonathan smirked, his confidence radiating through the room. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm about to make sure justice is served." 2 weeks earlier, Jonathan wheeled himself through the grand doors of the courthouse, his mind focused. Today, he would be representing a man who had been wrongfully accused of fraud. A small business owner who was being crushed under the weight of a powerful corporation's greed. Jonathan had always fought for the underdog, both in the military and in the courtroom. As he rolled past security, he could hear whispers behind him. "Is that him? The veteran lawyer? I heard he was one of the best, but look at him. Can he even handle a case anymore?" Jonathan was used to it. People saw the wheelchair and made assumptions. They didn't see the sharp mind, the years of experience, the victories that had sent corporate giants running. His client, a nervous man named Thomas Reeves, met him outside the courtroom doors. His hands shook as he wiped sweat from his brow. "Mr. Grayson," Thomas stammered, "are you sure about this? The company hired the best lawyers money can buy. They even paid off some of the media to make me look guilty." Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on the man's arm. "Thomas, I've taken on worse," he said firmly. "We're going to win this case." Thomas swallowed hard and nodded. Inside the courtroom, the opposing counsel smirked as Jonathan wheeled himself to the front. "So, this is the legendary Jonathan Grayson?" The corporate lawyer sneered. "I expected more." Jonathan didn't dignify the insult with a response. He simply placed his files on the table and waited. Then, Judge Malcolm entered. Jonathan had never met the judge before, but the moment their eyes met, he knew this wasn't going to be easy. The judge's cold gaze flickered over him, filled with something close to disgust. Jonathan clenched his jaw. He had dealt with people like this before. He had faced worse, both in battle and in the courtroom. But he had never been mocked so publicly. As the case proceedings began, the tension in the room thickened. The opposing lawyer tried to discredit Jonathan at every turn, throwing jabs at his past, his disability, his ability to argue. Jonathan countered every attack with precision, his legal arguments sharper than a blade. But then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. Judge Malcolm leaned forward, his lips twisting into a cruel smile. "I don't know why this man thinks he can practice law in his condition," the judge said loudly. "Perhaps we should wheel him out of here before he embarrasses himself any further." A wave of shocked gasps rippled through the room. Jonathan's fingers tightened into fists. He took a slow breath, his expression unreadable. Then, with perfect composure, he dropped the bombshell. He told them exactly who he was. Judge Malcolm paled. The courtroom held its breath. And in that moment, Jonathan knew he had the upper hand. Before the judge could recover, the door at the back of the courtroom burst open. A woman in a crisp black suit strode in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Your Honor," she called out, her voice cutting through the tension. "We have a serious problem." Jonathan turned his head slightly, recognizing her immediately. She was an attorney from the Ethics Committee, and judging by the fire in her eyes, something big was about to happen. The courtroom stood still. The woman in the black suit moved with purpose, her sharp gaze locked onto Judge Malcolm. She stopped in front of the bench and set down a thick folder filled with documents. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but firm. "This court is now under immediate review by the Judicial Ethics Committee." Judge Malcolm's face darkened. "Excuse me," he snapped. Jonathan watched closely, his hands folded in his lap. He knew exactly what was happening. "You have been reported for multiple ethical violations," the woman continued, her expression unyielding, "including discrimination and public misconduct. There are records of complaints against you, some as recent as last month. And after today's display," she let her voice trail off, the weight of her words filling the silence. The courtroom murmured in shock. People exchanged glances, whispering amongst themselves. Judge Malcolm clenched his jaw. "This is absurd," he barked. "Who do you think you are, barging into my courtroom like this?" The woman didn't even flinch. "My name is Rachel Carter," she said, "senior investigator for the State Bar. And as of now, this court is being placed under review." Jonathan's lips curled into a smirk. It seemed fate had a way of balancing the scales. The judge's knuckles turned white as he gripped his gavel. He was losing control, and he knew it. His gaze flicked to Jonathan, burning with fury. "You think this changes anything?" he growled. "You might have fooled these people, but you're still a cripple sitting in a chair, pretending to be something you're not." The courtroom collectively inhaled. A few people gasped outright. Even the opposing attorney looked slightly uncomfortable. But Jonathan? He remained still, calm. And then, he spoke. "Let me tell you something, Your Honor," Jonathan said, his voice steady. "This wheelchair isn't a weakness. It's a reminder of what I've survived. And unlike you, I don't hide behind a robe to feel powerful. I let my actions speak for themselves." Judge Malcolm's nostrils flared. "You're a disgrace," he shouted. "And you," Jonathan shot back, his tone razor-sharp, "are about to be removed from that bench." Rachel Carter straightened her posture. "Enough," she said. "As of now, all proceedings in this case are suspended until further notice. The Chief Justice will be informed immediately." The judge looked ready to explode. His gavel slammed down hard. "This case is dismissed," he barked. But before he could rise, Rachel's voice cut through the room. "No, Judge Malcolm," she said coldly. "You don't have that authority anymore." And with that, two officers stepped forward from the side of the courtroom. "Judge Malcolm," one of them said, "you need to come with us." The judge's face turned red with fury. "This is my courtroom," he bellowed. "Not anymore," Jonathan said, his voice calm but victorious. The officers moved forward, and for a moment, it seemed like the judge would resist. His hands curled into fists. His entire world was crashing down, and he had no way to stop it. Then, slowly, he rose from his seat. His once powerful presence had shrunk into something small, something weak. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the disgraced judge was escorted out. Jonathan exhaled slowly. It wasn't over yet, but this was a battle well won. And then, a loud bang echoed through the room. The doors burst open once again, and a man stormed in, his face twisted with rage. "Jonathan Grayson," the man bellowed. Jonathan turned, recognizing him instantly. It was Michael Davenport, the ruthless CEO of Greystone Corporation. The same man Jonathan had defeated in court a decade ago. And judging by the fury in his eyes, he wasn't here for a friendly reunion. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. Davenport's gaze burned with hatred. He pointed a finger straight at Jonathan. "You should have stayed gone," he sneered. "Because now, I'm going to destroy you." The entire courtroom froze. And Jonathan? He simply leaned back in his wheelchair and smirked. This was about to get interesting. A hush fell over the courtroom as Michael Davenport strode forward, his presence like a thunderstorm rolling in. His expensive suit was pressed to perfection, his hair slicked back in its usual, practiced style. But there was nothing polished about the fury in his eyes. Jonathan remained seated, his face unreadable. He had expected Davenport to show up eventually, but not like this, not barging into a courtroom still hot from the disgrace of Judge Malcolm. The moment stretched on, thick with tension. "Well," Jonathan finally said, his voice calm, "if it isn't Michael Davenport, I was wondering when you'd crawl out of whatever corporate lair you've been hiding in." Davenport sneered. "Still running that mouth of yours, I see. I'd hoped your years in obscurity had humbled you." "Clearly, I was mistaken," Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head. "Obscurity? You must not read the legal journals. My name still carries weight, unlike yours, which has been attached to scandal after scandal." Davenport's expression darkened. He stepped closer, looming over Jonathan's wheelchair. "You think you've won something today? You think taking down a washed-up judge means anything?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You have no idea what's coming for you." Jonathan's smirk didn't waver. He met Davenport's eyes with steady confidence. "If you're here to threaten me, you should know. I don't scare easy." Davenport laughed under his breath. "Oh, I'm not here to threaten you, Grayson. I'm here to warn you." Jonathan arched an eyebrow. "Is that so?"
Yes.
Davenport straightened, adjusting his cuffs. "This case you're fighting? It's already lost. I own the company pressing charges against your client. I own half the officials in this courthouse. You could be the best lawyer in the world, and it wouldn't matter." Jonathan's fingers drummed lightly against the armrest of his wheelchair. "See, that's the problem with men like you," he said. "You think power is about money, but power is about leverage. And right now, you don't have any." Davenport's jaw tensed. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Jonathan tilted his head. "You barged in here, loud and angry, because you're scared. Because you know I've already won in ways you can't control. So go ahead, make your threats, throw your money around. None of it will save you when the law catches up." A muscle twitched in Davenport's cheek. His fists clenched at his sides. "You talk too much," he muttered. "And you're running out of things to say," Jonathan countered smoothly. The tension crackled like static electricity. Then, Davenport exhaled sharply and stepped back. He turned on his heel and started toward the exit, but not before throwing one last look over his shoulder. "This isn't over," he promised. Jonathan smiled, but his eyes were sharp. "It never is." Davenport stormed out, slamming the doors behind him. The room remained frozen for several beats. Then, slowly, the murmurs started again. Rachel Carter, the Ethics Committee investigator, cleared her throat. "Well, that was dramatic." Jonathan chuckled. "You get used to it." Rachel eyed him carefully. "You do realize that man is dangerous, right? If he really has influence over this case, you could be in for a fight even you can't win." Jonathan's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I've never walked away from a fight just because it's difficult." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "Just be careful." Jonathan nodded, but said nothing. His client, Thomas Reeves, hurried up to him, looking both nervous and awed. "Mr. Grayson, that was incredible," he said. "But if Davenport is involved, does that mean I'm not giving up?" Jonathan finished for him. "They want us to think the case is lost, but that's just a tactic to make you panic. We stick to the plan." Thomas swallowed hard and nodded. "Right, the plan." Jonathan glanced toward the doors where Davenport had disappeared. The battle was just beginning, but Jonathan wasn't worried. He was ready. That night, Jonathan wheeled into his home office, his mind still buzzing with the events of the day. He had known this case would be a challenge, but now it was something bigger. Davenport wasn't just a corrupt businessman. He was invested in this case. and that meant something was hiding beneath the surface. Something deeper than a simple fraud accusation. Jonathan flipped open his laptop and started digging. He pulled up the financial records of the corporation pressing charges against his client. Numbers flashed across the screen: profit margins, asset distributions, stockholder reports. Then, something caught his eye. A transfer. A large transfer. $2 million. Moved from an offshore account to a private firm under Davenport's control. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "What are you up to?" he muttered. He traced the transaction, following the digital breadcrumbs. His fingers flew over the keyboard. His military training had taught him to look for patterns, and this wasn't just a business deal. It was hush money, and whoever got paid was hiding something big. Jonathan's heart pounded. He was onto something. But just as he clicked on the next file, his screen went black. A small, blinking message appeared. Access denied. Unauthorized attempt detected. Jonathan's breath slowed. His spine tingled with awareness. Someone had just noticed what he was doing, and they were warning him to stop. He exhaled and leaned back in his wheelchair. "Guess I just hit a nerve," he muttered. Then, a loud crash sounded from outside. Jonathan's head snapped up. His front window shattered as something heavy was thrown through it, landing with a dull thud in the middle of his living room. A brick, wrapped in a note. Jonathan wheeled forward, his pulse steady but alert. He reached down, picked up the note, and unfolded it. Only 4 words were scrawled in thick, black ink. "Back off or else." Jonathan stared at the words. Then, slowly, a small smile played at the corner of his lips. "They really don't know who they're messing with," he murmured. Because now, this wasn't just about winning a case. This was personal. Jonathan held the note between his fingers, his eyes scanning the sharp, hastily written words. "Back off or else." A lesser man might have felt fear creep into his bones. But Jonathan? He felt alive. He let out a slow breath, rolling his shoulders. The battlefield had simply shifted. Instead of dirt and bullets, it was legal loopholes and corporate corruption. But the fight was the same, and he had never been one to back down. He turned his wheelchair toward the front door, his mind running through the possibilities. Was this Davenport's doing? Or had Jonathan uncovered something even bigger than he'd realized? A sound outside caught his attention. Footsteps, light, cautious. Someone was still out there. Jonathan's hand instinctively reached for the small drawer in his desk, where he kept his insurance policy, a military-grade combat knife. He wasn't a violent man, but old habits from his time in the service never truly faded. He wheeled himself to the front door and unlocked it with a deliberate click. The footsteps hesitated. Whoever was out there wasn't expecting him to come outside. Jonathan pushed the door open. The cold night air hit his face, the street lamp outside casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. Silence. Then, a rustling from the bushes. Jonathan's grip on his knife tightened. "I know you're there," he called out, his voice calm but firm. "You've got 3 seconds to show yourself, or I start calling in favors from some very scary people." A beat of hesitation. Then, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Jonathan tensed. It was a woman. She wore a dark hoodie, her face partially obscured by the hood's shadow. Her stance was wary, her hands raised slightly to show she wasn't armed. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The woman exhaled sharply. "Someone who just saved your life," she muttered. Jonathan arched an eyebrow. "That brick through my window was your idea of a favor?" She scoffed. "No, that was a warning from the people you're digging into. And trust me, that's the nice version." Jonathan studied her carefully. She was young, mid-20s at most. Her dark eyes flicked toward his broken window, then back to him. "They wanted to send you a message," she continued. "I figured a brick was better than what they were originally planning." Jonathan's blood ran cold. He had faced countless enemies, but threats against his home, against his life, always carried a different weight. He set his jaw. And what exactly were they planning? The woman hesitated. "Let's just say, you wouldn't be alive to read the note." Jonathan's fingers tightened around the armrest of his wheelchair. This wasn't just a corporate fight anymore. This was something bigger, something deadly. He inhaled deeply, forcing himself to remain calm. "Who are they?" The woman shook her head. You're not ready to know that yet. Jonathan let out a dry chuckle. I think I'm past the not ready stage. The woman exhaled, looking conflicted. Finally, she pulled something from her pocket and tossed it onto Jonathan's lap. A flash drive. Everything you need to know is on there, she said. But be careful. If they find out you have it, you won't get another warning. Jonathan glanced down at the drive, then back up at her. And why should I trust you? She smirked faintly. You shouldn't. But right now, I'm the only person keeping you alive. With that, she turned and disappeared into the darkness, her footsteps fading into the night. Jonathan sat there for a long moment, the weight of the flash drive heavy in his lap. Then, slowly, he wheeled himself back inside, locking the door behind him. He had a case to win. But now, he had a conspiracy to unravel. The next morning, Jonathan sat in his office, the flash drive plugged into his computer. He watched his files loaded onto his screen. Dozens of documents, hidden transactions, confidential emails. His suspicions were right. Davenport wasn't just trying to win a case. He was covering something huge. Jonathan's eyes scanned over one particular document, an internal memo marked confidential. His breath caught. The document outlined illegal offshore accounts, bribes to government officials, and falsified reports. And at the very bottom, a signature. Judge Malcolm. Jonathan's pulse quickened. The corrupt judge hadn't just been playing favorites in court. He had been on Davenport's payroll. Jonathan leaned back, exhaling sharply. This is why Davenport was so confident. He had judges, corporate lawyers, and entire networks working to keep their crimes buried. But now, Jonathan had proof. He reached for his phone. He needed to get in touch with Rachel Carter. She needed to see this. Before he could dial, bang! A gunshot shattered the morning stillness. Jonathan ducked instinctively, rolling his wheelchair away from the window. Glass exploded as a bullet tore through the frame, embedding itself in the opposite wall. They just tried to kill me. Jonathan's heart pounded. He kept low, his mind racing. He had to move. Had to get out. Then, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice came through the line. You should have stayed retired, Grayson. The call ended. Jonathan sat there, breathing hard. He looked at the shattered window, the bullet hole in his wall. Then, he looked at the flash drive still plugged into his computer. His smirk returned. They just made their biggest mistake. Because now, it wasn't just his life on the line. It was justice itself. Jonathan sat motionless, his breathing slow and steady as he processed what had just happened. The bullet had barely missed him. The shattered window let in a cold morning breeze, carrying the scent of gunpowder and fresh danger. He glanced at the bullet hole in the wall, then at the flash drive still plugged into his laptop. The message was clear. Whoever was behind this knew what he had uncovered, and they wanted him dead before he could use it. Jonathan tightened his grip on his phone. He had faced enemy fire before, but this was different. In war, you could see the battlefield. Here, the enemy was hiding in the shadows, striking from a distance. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, he answered immediately. You missed, he said coolly. Silence. Then, a low chuckle. For now, the distorted voice replied. But I never missed twice. Jonathan smirked, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Then I guess I better make this next part count, huh? A pause. Then, click. The line went dead. Jonathan exhaled. They weren't just trying to scare him. They intended to silence him permanently. And that meant only one thing. He had to move. Now, with military precision, Jonathan moved through his home, grabbing only the essentials, his laptop, the flash drive, and a small locked case from his closet. He wheeled himself into the garage, pressing a hidden panel on the wall. A section of the floor clicked open, revealing a compartment beneath the concrete. Inside sat a sleek, black SUV, reinforced with bulletproof glass. Jonathan smirked. Old habits die hard. He had prepared for the worst long before the worst had found him. With swift efficiency, he transferred his things into the vehicle, then rolled himself inside. The SUV had been modified for his needs, military-grade controls that allowed him to drive without needing to leave his wheelchair. As he pulled onto the road, his mind was already working on his next move. Rachel Carter. She needed to see the files. She was the only one who could help him expose this conspiracy legally before his enemies made another move. He dialed her number as he sped down the road. She picked up almost instantly. Grayson? It's too early for... Somebody just put a bullet through my window, he interrupted. We need to meet. Now. Silence. Then, Rachel's voice turned sharp. Where are you? On the move. I have proof that Judge Malcolm was on Davenport's payroll. It's bigger than we thought. A pause. All right. There's a safe house on the west side of town. Texting you the address now. Get there fast. Jonathan hung up and floored the gas pedal. But just as he rounded a corner, a black SUV pulled up behind him. Then another. Jonathan's jaw clenched. They weren't wasting time. 2 vehicles. Tinted windows. Moving fast. And then, the first SUV rammed into him. His own vehicle lurched forward, tires screeching. His hands gripped the steering controls tightly. The second SUV sped up alongside him. The window rolled down, and a gun barrel emerged. Jonathan swerved just as the first shot rang out, missing his front tire by inches. All right, he muttered. Guess we're doing this the hard way. He twisted the steering control sharply, sending his SUV into a spin. The 2 vehicles flanking him hesitated, just long enough for Jonathan to hit a hidden switch on his dashboard. From the back of his SUV, a burst of spike strips ejected onto the road. The first pursuing vehicle hit them hard. Tires exploded. The driver lost control, swerving violently before smashing into a parked truck. One down. The second SUV, however, kept coming. Jonathan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The gunman leaned out the window again. Jonathan slammed the brakes. The gunman, caught off guard, fired wildly, but the shot missed as the second SUV skidded past him. Jonathan floored the accelerator. His reinforced bumper smashed into the side of the second vehicle, sending it crashing into the divider. The air filled with the screech of metal. Jonathan didn't look back. He gunned the engine and disappeared down the road. 15 minutes later, Jonathan pulled into a secluded parking lot behind an abandoned warehouse. Rachel was already waiting, her hands stuffed in the pockets of her black trench coat. Her sharp eyes scanned him as he rolled out of the SUV. You look like hell, she said. Jonathan chuckled. Good to see you too. She glanced at his bulletproof vehicle, the fresh dents and scrapes from the chase. I assume that's not from a fender bender. Jonathan sighed. Davenport's people tried to run me off the road. They're getting desperate. Rachel's face darkened. Then we need to move fast. Do you have the files? Jonathan pulled the flash drive from his pocket and handed it over. Everything's on there. Offshore accounts, bribery, and Malcolm? He was in deep. Rachel took the drive, nodding grimly. This could bring them all down. That's the plan, Jonathan said. But before Rachel could respond, her phone rang. She frowned and answered. Carter. A pause. Then, her eyes went wide. What? She whispered. Jonathan watched as her expression turned to stone. She hung up and looked at him. They found Thomas Reeves, she said, her voice tight. Jonathan's stomach dropped. What do you mean found? Rachel swallowed. He's dead. Silence. A cold rage settled into Jonathan's chest. Thomas had trusted him, had believed in him, and now he was gone. Rachel exhaled, shaking her head. This isn't just a legal case anymore. It's a war. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Then let's make sure we win. Because now, this wasn't just about justice. This was about revenge. The weight of Thomas Reeves' death hung over Jonathan like a storm cloud. The man had come to him for help, had believed in him, and now he was dead. Murdered. Rachel paced beside the SUV, gripping the flash drive tightly. This is escalating too fast, she muttered. Davenport's making moves like he knows we're closing in. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Because we are. Rachel shook her head. You don't get it. Killing Thomas? That's not just a message, it's a statement. They're wiping out loose ends. Jonathan's jaw clenched. Then we need to hit them before they hit anyone else. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. You're not hearing me, Grayson. If Davenport has the power to eliminate witnesses this quickly, we could be next. Jonathan's eyes darkened. Then let him try. Rachel groaned. Oh, great. The legendary Jonathan Grayson, military hero, fearless lawyer, still allergic to self-preservation. Jonathan smirked, but there was no humor in it. I just don't like bullies. Rachel exhaled sharply, but he could see the fire in her eyes. She might have been worried, but she wasn't about to back down either. She lifted the flash drive. I'll get this to the ethics committee, she said. We need to move fast before Davenport can cover his tracks. Jonathan nodded. And I'm going to find out who pulled the trigger on Thomas. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. You what? I have contacts, Jonathan said. People who don't like Davenport. If I can track down the hitman, I can prove he was ordered to kill Thomas. Rachel hesitated, then cursed under her breath. Fine. But be careful, Grayson. Davenport isn't the kind of enemy you want to fight alone. Jonathan met her gaze. I never fight alone. Rachel shook her head. You really are impossible. Jonathan gave her a small smile. And yet, you keep helping me. She rolled her eyes and walked toward her car. Because someone has to keep you alive. Jonathan watched as she drove away. Then, he turned back to his SUV and pulled out his phone. It was time to make a call. The sun had set by the time Jonathan wheeled himself into the Iron Pit, a dimly lit bar tucked into the bad side of town. The kind of place where deals were made in whispers and favors were worth more than cash. The bartender, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, glanced up as Jonathan rolled in. His eyes widened slightly. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Jonathan Grayson. Thought you were done with places like this. Jonathan smirked. Guess old habits die hard. Rick? Rick wiped a glass with a rag. What brings you back to the jungle? Jonathan leaned forward. I need information. Rick sighed, setting the glass down. That's what I was afraid of. Jonathan slid a folded bill across the bar. Rick hesitated, then took it, tucking it into his apron. Go on, Rick said, lowering his voice. Jonathan's expression hardened. Someone put a bullet in Thomas Reeves. I need to know who. Rick's eyes darkened. He glanced around the bar, then leaned in. Word on the street is Davenport called in a favor. Hired a specialist. Jonathan's fingers tightened against the bar. Name? Rick hesitated. Grayson. This guy isn't your usual thug. He's... Name, Jonathan repeated, his voice like steel. Rick exhaled. Victor Kane. Jonathan's mind immediately went into high gear. Victor Kane. A professional assassin. Former military, dishonorably discharged. If Davenport had brought him in, this was worse than he thought. Rick frowned. You're not seriously thinking of going after him? Jonathan smirked. Wouldn't be the first time. Rick shook his head. You're crazy. Jonathan grabbed his drink and took a slow sip. That's what people keep telling me. Rick sighed. If you're set on this, Kane's been laying low. Word is he's holed up in an old warehouse near the docks. Jonathan nodded. Thanks, Rick. Rick scoffed. Yeah. Just try not to get yourself killed. Jonathan set the glass down and wheeled toward the exit. Because now, he had a target, and he was going hunting. An hour later, Jonathan sat in his SUV, parked outside an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront. Through the windshield, he could see dim light flickering inside. A shadow moved past one of the windows. Victor Kane was in there. Jonathan exhaled, preparing himself. This wasn't just some courtroom argument. Kane was a trained killer, and Jonathan wasn't exactly in prime fighting condition anymore. But what he did have? A plan. Jonathan reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small device, a signal jammer. With a flick of a switch, any cell phones or security cameras inside the warehouse would be useless. He activated it, then grabbed his combat knife, tucking it into his side holster. Then, he moved. With years of training still ingrained in his muscle memory, Jonathan wheeled himself toward the warehouse's side entrance. The door was unlocked, careless. Kane must not have been expecting company. Jonathan slipped inside, moving silently. The warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and oil. Wooden crates and metal beams created shadows everywhere. And then, a voice. I was wondering when you'd show up. Jonathan froze. Across the room, leaning casually against a stack of crates, was Victor Kane. Tall, built like a tank, with cold, calculating eyes. A pistol rested in his hand, aimed lazily in Jonathan's direction. Jonathan smirked. "You talk like I'm late." Kane chuckled. "Davenport said you might come looking." He straightened, cracking his knuckles. "Told me to deal with you if you did." Jonathan tilted his head. "What? No small talk first?" Kane grinned. "I'm more of an action guy." Then, he raised the gun. Jonathan moved. With a sharp jerk of his wrist, he flung his knife straight into Kane's shooting hand. Kane roared in pain, the gun clattering to the floor. Jonathan didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, ramming his wheelchair into Kane's knee with brutal force. The assassin staggered, cursing, but he was fast, too fast. He spun, swinging a fist. Jonathan ducked, rolling his chair backward just in time. Kane growled, "You really don't know when to quit." Jonathan smirked. "Neither do you." Kane lunged again, and Jonathan hit a hidden button on his wheelchair. A taser dart shot out, hitting Kane square in the chest. The assassin convulsed, his body seizing as electricity ripped through him. Then, he collapsed. Jonathan wheeled closer, breathing hard. He stared down at the unconscious hitman. Then, he pulled out his phone and dialed. Rachel picked up. "Grayson?" Jonathan exhaled. "I've got him." A beat of silence. Then, "Wait, you have Victor Kane?" Jonathan smirked. "Yeah, and I think he's ready to talk." Because now, Davenport's secret weapon had just become his. Victor Kane groaned, his muscles twitching from the aftershock of the taser. Jonathan sat a few feet away, his wheelchair positioned between the unconscious assassin and the only exit. The warehouse was eerily silent except for Kane's ragged breathing. Jonathan had secured the hitman with zip ties, tight enough that even a trained killer like him would have trouble breaking free. Kane's eyes fluttered open, and the moment he realized what had happened, he laughed. A slow, guttural chuckle. Jonathan arched an eyebrow. "Something funny?" Kane rolled his shoulders, testing the restraints. "You really think this changes anything?" His voice was hoarse but dripping with arrogance. "Davenport won't let you walk away from this." Jonathan smirked. "That's the thing, Kane. I don't walk." Kane's grin faltered, just slightly. Jonathan leaned forward. "But I do win. And right now, you have two choices. Talk, or I make sure you're the next loose end Davenport ties up." Kane scoffed. "Please. I've dealt with worse than you." Jonathan's smirk didn't waver. "Maybe, but I did just take you down, didn't I?" Silence. Kane exhaled through his nose, eyes narrowing. Jonathan continued. "You know how this works. You're expendable. You think Davenport's going to send a rescue party for you? No. He's already looking for your replacement." Kane looked away, jaw tight. Jonathan knew he had him. He pressed on. "Here's the deal. I don't care about you. I care about who hired you to kill Thomas Reeves. Give me the name. The real name." Kane remained silent. Jonathan tilted his head. "All right. Let's do it this way. I have a friend in the ethics committee. I can hand you over, and you'll be looking at a life sentence." Or, he let the word hang in the air. Kane's gaze flicked up. "Or." Jonathan's smirk returned. "Or you help me burn Davenport to the ground." Kane hesitated. He had been in the game long enough to know when the odds were turning. Jonathan could see the calculation in his eyes, the way his fingers twitched against the restraints. Finally, Kane sighed. "All right, Grayson. You win." Jonathan's expression remained neutral, but internally, he knew this was it. Kane leaned forward. The order didn't just come from Davenport. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Who else?" Kane's jaw tightened. "Judge Malcolm." Jonathan inhaled sharply. Kane continued, his voice low. Malcolm wasn't just working with Davenport. He was deep in it. He was helping launder money through legal settlements, rigging cases, eliminating problems. Jonathan's mind raced. This was bigger than he thought. He kept his voice steady. "And Thomas?" Kane exhaled. Thomas wasn't just some guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. He found something. Jonathan's pulse quickened. "What?" Kane's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know. But whatever it was," Malcolm panicked. "He called me directly. Told me to handle it. Jonathan clenched his fists. Malcolm had ordered the hit personally, and that meant one thing. Judge Malcolm wasn't just corrupt. He was dangerous. Jonathan exhaled, processing the information. He needed to act fast. Rachel had the flash drive, but this changed everything. I need proof, Jonathan said. Something that directly connects Malcolm to the order. Kane hesitated. Jonathan arched an eyebrow. Unless you want to go to prison? Kane scowled. Then, with a sigh, he nodded toward his jacket, still lying on the floor. Front pocket. My burner phone. The call logs are in there. Jonathan reached over and retrieved the phone, his heart pounding as he scrolled through the call history. And there it was. A direct call from Judge Malcolm, just hours before Thomas was killed. Jonathan stared at the screen, his mind already working through the next steps. Kane watched him carefully. What now, Grayson? Jonathan looked up, his gaze like steel. Now, he said, we take the fight straight to them. Jonathan called Rachel immediately. She answered on the first ring. Tell me you have good news. Oh, I have more than that, Jonathan replied, glancing at the burner phone in his hand. I have proof. Rachel exhaled sharply. Where are you? At the docks. And I have a guest. He looked at Kane. He's ready to talk. Rachel was silent for a moment. Then, meet me at the safe house in 20 minutes. Jonathan nodded. On my way. He hung up and turned back to Kane. You're coming with me. Kane snorted. Like I have a choice? Jonathan smirked. Nope. He cut the zip ties and motioned toward the door. Kane rubbed his wrists, then slowly stood. You really think this is gonna work? Jonathan wheeled forward. I know it will. Because now, they weren't just building a case. They were going to war. Jonathan and Kane arrived at the safe house, a nondescript apartment tucked away in a quiet part of town. Rachel was already there, pacing near the window. She turned the moment they entered. Tell me you got something solid. Jonathan handed her the burner phone. Call logs. Malcolm gave the order himself. Rachel's eyes widened as she scanned the screen. This is enough to take him down. Jonathan nodded. And Davenport with him. Kane leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Yeah, well, don't celebrate yet. Rachel frowned. Why not? Kane exhaled. Because Malcolm and Davenport aren't going down quietly. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Kane hesitated. Then, his next words sent ice through Jonathan's veins. They know about the flash drive, Kane said. They're coming for it. Tonight. Rachel's face went pale. Wait, what? Jonathan's grip on his armrests tightened. Then, a loud bang from outside. Rachel rushed to the window. Her breath caught. Oh no. Jonathan wheeled forward. What? She turned to him, her voice tight. They're already here. Jonathan inhaled deeply. And just like that, the fight was at their doorstep. The safe house fell into a tense silence. Jonathan could feel the shift in the air. A storm was coming. Rachel's fingers tightened around the burner phone. Her eyes locked on the window. Black SUVs, she murmured. 3 of them. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Davenport's people. Kane cursed under his breath. Told you they wouldn't waste time. Jonathan's mind raced. They had proof that could obliterate Malcolm and Davenport. But if they didn't survive tonight, none of it would matter. He turned to Rachel. We need an exit plan. Rachel pulled out her own phone, scrolling quickly. There's a back alley, she said. If we can get to the underground garage, we might be able to slip out. Kane snorted. Yeah, sure. You think they didn't cover the exits? Jonathan arched an eyebrow. Then what do you suggest? Kane cracked his knuckles. We fight. Rachel glared at him. This isn't a bar brawl, Kane. They have guns. Kane shrugged. So do I. Jonathan sighed, shaking his head. No, we don't need to win a gunfight. We need to escape with the evidence. Rachel nodded. Agreed. But how? Jonathan looked at Kane. How many men do you think Davenport sent? Kane peeked through the blinds, assessing. 6, maybe 8. Tactical guys. No uniforms, but definitely trained. Jonathan frowned. Too many to fight head-on. Rachel bit her lip. We need a diversion. Jonathan glanced around the room, his military instincts kicking in. The apartment was small, one main room, a bathroom, and a kitchen. No way out except the front and back doors. His eyes landed on the gas stove. Then, an idea clicked. We make them think we're still inside, Jonathan said. Rachel blinked. How? Jonathan rolled to the kitchen, turning the gas knob just slightly. The faint hiss of gas filled the air. Then, he grabbed a chair and wedged it under the front doorknob. Rachel's eyes widened. You're going to blow up the apartment? Not exactly. Jonathan grabbed a candle from the table and placed it near the stove. Once they bust in, the air shift will carry the gas toward the flame. Boom. Kane chuckled. You're insane. Jonathan smirked. I prefer creative. Rachel exhaled. All right, but that still doesn't get us out. Jonathan pointed to the bathroom. Window. Kane frowned. You think I can fit through that? Jonathan rolled his eyes. We don't all need to fit. Just me. Rachel's brow furrowed. Wait, what? Jonathan locked eyes with her. They're expecting me. If they think I'm inside, they'll focus on the front. You and Kane sneak out the back. Rachel's jaw tightened. And what about you? Jonathan smirked. I'll find my own way out. Before Rachel could argue, the sound of heavy boots thudded outside the door. Kane tensed. They're here. Jonathan rolled toward the bathroom, grabbing a small mirror from the sink. He angled it toward the alley clear. Then, he turned to Rachel. Go. Now. Rachel hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. Don't die, Grayson. Jonathan grinned. I'll try my best. Rachel and Kane slipped through the back door just as. Boom. The front door exploded inward, splinters flying everywhere. Armed men rushed inside, sweeping the apartment. Jonathan waited a beat, then wheeled himself forward, deliberately letting his chair creak. A man in tactical gear spotted him. Got him. Jonathan smirked. Too late. The gas hit the flame. Kaboom. A fireball erupted from the kitchen. The force of the blast hurled Jonathan backward. Heat seared his face as flames engulfed the apartment. The men inside screamed as the explosion rocked the building. Jonathan hit the floor hard, his wheelchair skidding across the tiled bathroom. Pain shot through his shoulder. He groaned, rolling onto his side. The world spun, but he was alive. He forced himself up, ignoring the ringing in his ears. Through the smoke, he saw the bathroom window, shattered from the blast. Jonathan clenched his jaw. Perfect. With a deep breath, he crawled through the opening, ignoring the sharp sting of glass cutting his hands. The alley was quiet. Rachel and Kane were gone. Jonathan exhaled in relief. They made it. He turned toward the street and froze. Standing at the end of the alley, his suit barely ruffled, was Michael Davenport. His cold eyes met Jonathan's, a slow smirk forming on his lips. Nice trick, Grayson, Davenport said smoothly. But you didn't really think I'd come unprepared, did you? Jonathan's fists clenched. His body ached, his ears still ringing. Davenport stepped forward, hands in his pockets. You've been a thorn in my side for a long time, he mused. But this little game? It's over. Jonathan smirked, despite the pain. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing. Davenport chuckled. Oh, I doubt that. You see. A gunshot rang out. Davenport jerked, his smirk vanishing as blood bloomed across his shoulder. Jonathan turned. At the mouth of the alley stood Rachel, gun still smoking. She lowered it slightly. Yeah, I don't have time for speeches. Davenport stumbled, clutching his wound. His men, those who hadn't been caught in the explosion, rushed to his side. Rachel glanced at Jonathan. Car. Now. Jonathan didn't hesitate. He wheeled toward the black sedan she had parked nearby, pain radiating through his body. Davenport's men raised their weapons, but Rachel fired another warning shot. The men hesitated. Rachel smirked. Didn't think so. She slid into the driver's seat. Jonathan barely had time to buckle in before she floored the gas. The car roared forward, tires screeching as they sped off into the night. Jonathan exhaled, leaning back. His shoulder throbbed. His hands stung. But they had survived. Rachel glanced at him. That was reckless. Jonathan chuckled. I know. Rachel shook her head. We're not done, you know. They'll regroup. Malcolm still has power. Jonathan smirked, staring at the city lights ahead. Then we take the fight to him. Because now? It wasn't just about winning. It was about finishing this once and for all. The city blurred past them as Rachel drove like a woman possessed, weaving through traffic with surgical precision. Jonathan clenched his jaw, the ache in his shoulder growing worse by the second. The explosion, the escape, the gunfight, they had barely made it out alive. And yet, as he glanced at Rachel gripping the wheel, her eyes sharp and determined, he knew they were far from done. "You all right?" she asked, sparing him a quick glance. Jonathan smirked, wincing. "Fine, all right." Rachel sighed. "We need to get you patched up." Jonathan exhaled. "Later. We have bigger problems." Rachel nodded. "Yeah, like the fact that Michael Davenport is still breathing." Jonathan stared out the window, deep in thought. "Not for long." Rachel arched an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" Jonathan turned to her, his eyes dark with purpose. "I'm thinking it's time we take everything from him the way he's tried to take everything from us." Rachel's grip tightened on the wheel. "Then tell me where we start." Jonathan leaned forward, despite the pain. "We hit them where it hurts." Rachel's lips curled into a smirk. "Their money." Jonathan nodded. "Exactly." 20 minutes later, they pulled into an underground parking garage. Rachel killed the engine and exhaled. Kane was waiting for them near the elevator, arms crossed. He had ditched his blood-stained shirt for a clean one, but he still looked like he had been through hell. "Took you long enough," he muttered. Rachel rolled her eyes. "You're welcome for the rescue." Kane smirked but turned to Jonathan. "You got a plan?" Jonathan wheeled himself out of the car. "I always have a plan." Kane snorted. "That's what I'm afraid of." Jonathan ignored him and pulled out his laptop. He plugged in the burner phone they had taken from Kane. The data was still intact. Rachel leaned over. "What are we looking for?" Jonathan's fingers flew over the keys. "Bank transactions, offshore accounts, hidden money trails. Anything that connects Davenport and Malcolm." Kane frowned. "You really think you can find something big enough to take them down?" Jonathan smirked. "I know I can." A few moments passed in silence, the only sound the tapping of keys. Then, Jonathan froze. His eyes locked onto the screen. Rachel frowned. "What is it?" Jonathan exhaled sharply. "A transfer." Kane peered over. "Yeah, so? They're rich. I'm sure there are plenty of transfers." Jonathan's smirk returned. "Not like this one." Rachel leaned in. "Talk to me." Jonathan turned the laptop so they could see. "Look at this. $10 million. Moved from a corporate account under Davenport's name into a private security firm." Rachel's eyes widened. "A hit squad." Jonathan nodded. "Exactly. And guess where the money went after that?" Kane's jaw clenched. "Judge Malcolm." Jonathan exhaled. "We just found their war chest." Rachel blinked. "Wait, you're saying we can trace their entire operation?" Jonathan smirked. "Not just trace it." He turned to Rachel. "We can drain it." Kane let out a low whistle. "Oh, you really want to piss these guys off." Jonathan's grin didn't waver. "I don't just want to piss them off, Kane." He tapped the screen. "I want to end them." Rachel cracked her knuckles. "Tell me what to do." Jonathan pointed to the laptop. "We reroute the funds. If we drain this account, we cut them off at the knees. No more bribes. No more hit squads. No more power." Rachel hesitated. "That's risky. If they catch wind of it before we finish?" Jonathan smirked. "Then we finish before they catch on." Kane chuckled. "I like this guy." Rachel sighed. "All right, let's burn them." Jonathan's fingers danced over the keys, bypassing firewalls and encryption like second nature. The numbers on the screen shifted, moving millions of dollars away from Davenport and Malcolm's accounts. Jonathan didn't just take the money. He made sure it landed where it would hurt the most. Charities they had defrauded, legal funds for people they had ruined. Rachel watched in awe. "You're really doing it." Jonathan smirked. "I told you. Leverage beats money every time." Kane chuckled. "You know, for a lawyer, you think like a criminal." Jonathan shrugged. "I think like a soldier." Rachel nodded. "We're almost done. Just a few more." A sudden beep from Jonathan's laptop cut her off. Rachel frowned. "What was that?" Jonathan's smirk faded. They found us. Kane cursed. How bad? Jonathan's eyes flicked over the screen. Bad. They just locked me out of their systems. And worse. He turned to them. They know who did it. Rachel paled. That means... Jonathan's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. A voice crackled through the speaker. You just made a very big mistake, Grayson. Jonathan's lips curled into a smirk. I make a lot of those. The voice on the other end was cold. This one? You won't live to fix. The line went dead. Rachel and Kane exchanged uneasy glances. Then, a loud crash from outside. Rachel rushed to the parking garage exit, peering out. Her face went white. Jonathan. Jonathan wheeled closer. Black SUVs were pulling in, headlights blinding in the dim light. And stepping out of the lead vehicle, Judge Malcolm, dressed in his judicial robes, a smug grin stretched across his face. Surrounded by armed men, Kane let out a low whistle. Well, that's not good. Jonathan exhaled, rolling his shoulders. No, he murmured. It's perfect. Rachel shot him a look. How in the hell is this perfect? Jonathan smirked. Because now? He turned toward Malcolm. They have nowhere left to hide. The doors to the SUVs slammed shut. Malcolm's men advanced. Rachel's gun was already in her hand. Kane cracked his knuckles. Jonathan tightened his grip on his wheelchair. This was it. The final battle had begun. The parking garage felt like a battlefield waiting to explode. The air was thick with tension, the hum of the SUV engines mixing with the slow, deliberate footsteps of Judge Malcolm's armed men. Jonathan sat still, his wheelchair positioned in the center, flanked by Rachel on one side, Kane on the other. Judge Malcolm stepped forward, straightening his robes as if he were still presiding over a courtroom. His smile was smug, his eyes cold. Well, he drawled. Jonathan Grayson, the legendary lawyer. And yet, here you are, cornered, outnumbered, and out of time. Jonathan smirked, unbothered. You talk too much, Malcolm. The judge chuckled. Perhaps. But considering this is the last conversation you'll ever have, I think I'll take my time. Rachel's grip tightened around her gun. If you think we're just going to sit here and let you kill us, you're dumber than you look. Malcolm sighed dramatically. Oh, Miss Carter. Always so. Predictable. He motioned to his men. Confiscate their weapons. Rachel raised her gun. Click. A red dot appeared on her chest. Then another. Then a dozen more. Jonathan's stomach clenched. Snipers. Rachel hesitated, weighing her options. Kane muttered under his breath. Well, this sucks. Jonathan exhaled. Rachel. Stand down. Rachel's jaw clenched. Slowly, she lowered her gun. Malcolm's smirk widened. See? That's better. His men stepped forward, yanking Rachel's gun from her hand. They frisked Kane, pulling a concealed blade from his boot. Jonathan remained still. He wasn't armed, not in the traditional sense. His mind was his weapon. And right now, he was already calculating his next move. Malcolm clasped his hands behind his back. You were so close, Jonathan. You almost made me nervous. He chuckled. But you should have known better. I own this city. The police, the courts. I control it all. Jonathan smirked. You don't control me. Malcolm's smile faltered. Jonathan leaned forward, eyes gleaming. And that scares the hell out of you, doesn't it? Malcolm's nostrils flared. You think you've won something, Malcolm snapped. You think draining our accounts will destroy me? I can make that money back in a week. Jonathan tilted his head. Maybe. Then, he reached into his pocket. Malcolm's men tensed, aiming their weapons. Jonathan slowly pulled out his phone. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Jonathan tapped the screen. Making sure you're finished. The judge frowned. What? Then his own phone buzzed. And then another buzz. And another. Around them, his men's phones began vibrating, ringing, one after another. Rachel's eyes widened. Jonathan, what did you do? Jonathan's smirk deepened. I sent out everything. Malcolm's face drained of color. He fumbled for his phone, staring at the screen. His hands trembled as he scrolled. News headlines. Breaking. Judge Malcolm and Michael Davenport linked to multi-million-dollar fraud operation. Leaked documents reveal Judge Malcolm's involvement in criminal conspiracy. Corruption at the highest levels. A legendary lawyer uncovers the truth. Jonathan's voice was like a blade. Every journalist, every government agency, every law firm in the country just got copies of your bank transfers, your bribes, your crimes. Malcolm staggered back. You know. Jonathan shrugged. Oops. One of Malcolm's men cursed. Another pulled out his phone, reading the messages flooding in. Boss, this is everywhere. Malcolm's breathing turned ragged. No. Rachel smirked. Looks like you just lost your job, Your Honor. Malcolm's panic turned to rage. His face twisted. He reached into his robe. Jonathan's muscles tensed. Gun. Malcolm whipped out a pistol, aiming straight at Jonathan's head. The room froze. Jonathan didn't blink. Malcolm's hands shook as he gritted his teeth. You think you've won? You think you've destroyed me? Jonathan remained calm. I know I have. Malcolm's finger hovered over the trigger. He was unraveling. His men shifted, unsure. The power dynamic had flipped in an instant. Then, Kane moved, faster than anyone expected. In a blur, he lunged. Crack. Malcolm screamed as Kane's fist snapped against his wrist, forcing the gun to clatter to the ground. Kane didn't stop. He grabbed the judge by his collar and slammed him against the SUV. You're done, Kane growled. You hear me? Done. Malcolm's eyes darted wildly. Desperation clawed at his face. Then, sirens. Loud. Echoing. Rachel smirked. Right on time. Jonathan smiled. Figured we could use some backup. The screech of tires. Dozens of police cruisers flooded the garage. Malcolm's men turned, panicked. They hesitated, then ran, disappearing into the shadows. The judge, however, was trapped. Officers poured in, guns raised. Judge Malcolm, hands in the air. Malcolm froze. Jonathan wheeled forward, his voice quiet but lethal. You always thought you were untouchable. He tilted his head. Guess you were wrong. Malcolm's face collapsed in on itself. The officers swarmed in, slamming him against the hood of the SUV. Rachel exhaled, shaking her head. That was satisfying. Jonathan smirked. Told you we'd win. Kane rolled his shoulders. You're insane, Grayson. Jonathan shrugged. And yet it worked. Rachel crossed her arms. So, what now? Jonathan leaned back, breathing deeply. Now. He smiled. We finished this, because Malcolm might have been caught, but Davenport was still out there, and Jonathan was going to make sure he went down next. Judge Malcolm was finished. Jonathan watched as the disgraced judge was hauled into the back of a police cruiser, his face pale and void of its usual arrogance. The sirens echoed in the parking garage, blue and red lights flashing across the cold concrete. Rachel let out a breath, rubbing her temple. One down. Kane scoffed. One big one. Jonathan smirked. Not big enough, because Michael Davenport was still out there. And Jonathan knew Davenport wasn't the type to run. He was the type to retaliate. Jonathan turned to Rachel. How long before the feds pick up on this? Rachel checked her phone, scanning through the flood of notifications. They already have. This is everywhere. The Justice Department, the FBI, hell, even the Attorney General's office just issued a statement. Malcolm is done. Jonathan nodded. Good. Rachel hesitated. But that also means Davenport knows. Jonathan's smirk didn't waver. That's what I'm counting on. Rachel frowned. Wait, you want him to come after you? Jonathan shrugged. He was going to anyway. I just made sure he has no choice but to come now. Kane snorted. Remind me never to piss you off, Grayson. Rachel shook her head. All right. What's the plan? Jonathan turned his wheelchair slightly, glancing at the police cruisers speeding away. The plan is simple. He looked at Rachel. We make Davenport think he still has a chance to fix this. Rachel's eyebrows furrowed. How? Jonathan smirked. By offering him a way out. Kane narrowed his eyes. You're setting a trap. Jonathan nodded. Exactly. Rachel frowned. And what if he doesn't take the bait? Jonathan's smile turned razor sharp. He will. 1 hour later. Jonathan sat in a high-rise penthouse, staring out the window at the glowing city skyline. The room was empty except for him, and the burner phone on the glass table in front of him. Rachel and Kane were close, watching from a safe distance, ready to move the second things went south. Jonathan exhaled, cracked his knuckles, and dialed the number. Davenport picked up on the first ring. "You have some nerve, Grayson," Davenport's voice growled. Jonathan smirked. "And you have a problem." Silence. Jonathan continued. "Malcolm is gone. His assets are frozen. Every dirty deal he's ever made is public. His connections are jumping ship." He let the words sink in. "Including yours." Davenport's voice was eerily calm. "So what do you want, Jonathan?" Jonathan leaned forward. "A meeting." Davenport chuckled darkly. "You want to meet me? After everything you've done?" Jonathan smirked. "I want to offer you something." Davenport hesitated. "I'm listening." Jonathan let his voice drop. "A way out." Silence. Then, "Where?" Davenport asked. Jonathan gave him an address. "A rooftop in the city's industrial district." "Neutral ground." Davenport exhaled. "All right, Grayson. Let's see what you've got." The line went dead. Rachel stepped forward. "This is insane." Kane folded his arms. "It's also genius." Rachel shot him a glare. "You realize he's going to try and kill you, right?" Jonathan smirked. "I'm counting on it. Because tonight?" This ended. One way or another. Midnight, the rooftop. The wind howled across the rooftop, carrying the scent of rain. The city lights stretched below, glittering against the darkness. Jonathan sat at the edge of the rooftop, calm, waiting. Footsteps echoed behind him. Michael Davenport emerged from the stairwell, flanked by 4 armed men. He adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. "You really have a death wish, don't you?" Jonathan smirked. "You showed up?" Davenport exhaled. "So, let's hear it. What's this way out you're offering?" Jonathan met his gaze. "Surrender." Davenport laughed. Loud, amused, like Jonathan had told the best joke he'd ever heard. "You think I'm going to surrender?" Davenport grinned. "I have more money than God. I have men who would die for me, and I—" Jonathan held up a hand. Davenport paused. Jonathan tilted his head. "Did you really think I'd come alone?" Davenport's grin faltered. From the shadows, red laser sights lit up his men. Snipers. Kane's voice crackled through Jonathan's earpiece. "We've got eyes on every one of them. Say the word." Davenport's jaw clenched. Jonathan smirked. "Your money? Gone. Your judge? Arrested. Your men?" He motioned to the rooftop edge. One step away from getting picked off. Davenport's face darkened. Jonathan leaned forward. "You're done. You know it. I know it. They know it." He motioned to his men. "The question is, how do you want this to end?" Silence. Davenport exhaled through his nose. "You son of a—" Then, he lunged. Jonathan moved. With a swift motion, Jonathan grabbed his wheelchair's side lever and launched himself sideways. Just as Davenport lunged for him, Davenport lost balance. His foot slipped, and suddenly, he was at the edge of the rooftop. Jonathan caught himself, gripping the metal railing. Davenport wasn't so lucky. He staggered, teetering over the edge. His arms flailed. His eyes went wide. For the first time, Michael Davenport looked afraid. Jonathan wheeled forward, his voice calm. "Give me your hand." Davenport hesitated. You're going to let me fall." Jonathan shook his head. "That's not who I am." Davenport swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he reached. Their hands met. Then, bang, a gunshot. Davenport jerked violently. His body stiffened, then fell. Jonathan's eyes widened as Davenport's body plummeted off the rooftop. Rachel rushed forward, but it was too late. Davenport hit the pavement below. Silence. Jonathan exhaled. His heart pounded. Rachel turned, furious. "Where did that shot come from?" Kane's voice crackled in. "We didn't take the shot." Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "Then who?" Then, he saw her. Across the rooftop, a woman in a black coat, lowering a rifle. Her sharp eyes locked onto Jonathan's. Then, she disappeared into the night. Jonathan exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Rachel turned to him. So, that's it? Jonathan smirked. Yeah. He looked at Davenport's motionless body below. That's it. Because now? It was finally over. The rooftop was silent except for the wind. The city lights below stretched like a vast, glittering ocean. But Jonathan's focus remained locked on the spot where Michael Davenport had fallen. A man who had built an empire on greed, corruption, and intimidation. Now nothing more than a lifeless body on the pavement. Rachel exhaled sharply. Well, that was unexpected. Jonathan's jaw was tight. That shot wasn't from us. Kane's voice crackled in through the earpiece. Confirmed. None of my guys pulled the trigger. Rachel turned in the direction where the shooter had stood. Who the hell was she? Jonathan's mind raced. The woman had been too precise. A single shot, perfectly placed. A professional. His lips pressed into a thin line. A loose end. Rachel folded her arms. You think Davenport had a backup plan? Jonathan's eyes narrowed. I think someone else wanted him dead more than we did. Kane's voice came back over the calm. Police are on their way. We should get moving. Jonathan exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Agreed. Rachel shook her head, still processing. I mean, it's over, right? Jonathan turned toward her. Is it? Because something still didn't sit right. Davenport had been expecting them tonight. He had come with men, but not enough men. It was like he thought he still had an edge. Jonathan's gut told him there was another player in the game. And if they were capable of killing Davenport, they were capable of a lot more. Still, the battle was over. For now. Rachel let out a long breath. Let's get the hell out of here. Jonathan nodded. Kane, meet us at the safe house. Copy that. Rachel and Jonathan slipped through the rooftop exit, disappearing into the city's darkness one last time. 2 days later, the headlines were everywhere. Disgraced Judge Malcolm arrested for corruption. Connections to Michael Davenport exposed. Millionaire Michael Davenport found dead. Fall from building ruled mysterious. Corruption ring shattered as evidence goes public. Jonathan sat in his office, flipping through the news. His name wasn't in the reports, but he didn't care. The world knew the truth now. Davenport's empire had crumbled. The corrupt judges, the bought politicians, the dirty lawyers, they were all scrambling for cover. Rachel walked in, tossing a file onto his desk. It's official. The FBI is sweeping through everything. They're arresting people left and right. Jonathan smirked. Took them long enough. Rachel scoffed. Yeah, well, they needed a little help from a certain disabled lawyer. Jonathan chuckled. I just pointed them in the right direction. Rachel sat across from him, folding her arms. So what now? You finally going to take a break? Jonathan exhaled, glancing at the window. Maybe. Rachel eyed him. You don't sound convinced. Jonathan hesitated. Then, he grabbed a separate file from his desk and slid it toward her. Rachel frowned and opened it. Her face immediately darkened. Inside was a surveillance photo. A woman, wearing a black coat, holding a sniper rifle. Rachel cursed. You found her? Jonathan nodded. Her name is Isabel Cross. Ex-military. Black Ops. Ghost-level assassin. Rachel inhaled sharply. And she's the one who killed Davenport? Jonathan's eyes flickered. Yes. Rachel frowned. Why? Jonathan's jaw clenched. That's what I need to find out. Rachel studied him for a long moment. You're not going to let this go, are you? Jonathan leaned back. Davenport was powerful, but he wasn't the top. He pointed at the file. Someone else wanted him gone. Someone big enough to hire her. Rachel sighed. You just can't enjoy a win, can you? Jonathan smirked. Not when the game's still going. Rachel shook her head. Well, when you figure out who's pulling the strings, let me know. She stood up, rolling her shoulders. In the meantime, I'm taking a vacation. Jonathan chuckled. You deserve one. Rachel smirked. Damn right I do. As she walked to the door, she turned back. Grayson? Jonathan looked up. Rachel's expression softened. You did good. Jonathan exhaled. So did you. Rachel gave a small nod. Take care of yourself. With that, she was gone. Jonathan sat alone for a while, letting the quiet settle in. The fight was over. The war was won. But somewhere in the shadows, the real mastermind was still out there. Watching. Waiting. Jonathan stared at the surveillance photo one last time. Then, he smirked. Guess we're not done yet.